The world is going through a great transition. You can all feel it. It is the job of the historians to look at the past and explain how we got here to the present day, and most importantly, where are we going in the future? And I'm going to present to you today multiple different perspectives on how we should view history. How have other people in history viewed themselves, as well as the most appropriate way for understanding the greater meta view of history itself. Welcome to Diary of a History Teacher. This is a part of my longer series called Stuff That I Wish I Could Teach to My Students. I'm a high school history teacher. I've been teaching history, geography, and government for 4 years now. And I'm starting this YouTube channel as a way to show my view of the world as well as educate people about the history of our species. So, where am I going today? So, I am going to start by talking to you about the original thought process of how history unfolds, which is a circle or a cycle. Then I'm going to explain the other perspective, the opposite of a circle, which is a line, where we are progressing towards a greater truth um, or a better life. It's a progressive view, and we're going straight towards a line. Um, and then I'm going to show you a couple of thinkers that are explaining these two perspectives of a circle and a line um, through a couple of their books by doing a little book analysis. It's only about a slide, and then I will show you the combination of these two thought processes into a third thought process, which is history is a spiral where we are repeating stuff in the past, but we're moving forward in a greater direction as well. And then lastly, I'm going to show you the new, and in my opinion, the most appropriate way of viewing history, which is history is more of an ocean. And I will explain that at the very end. So please, at this time, go ahead and hit like on the video. It really, really means a lot and it helps pushes this video into the YouTube algorithm. And then if you really enjoy my content, go ahead and check out some of my other videos. Hit subscribe right down below, and if anything that I say today interests you or makes you think in a new way, or you want to share some stuff that you have learned as well, go ahead and drop a comment. I want to use my comment section as a conversation between everything that I'm saying and what you're thinking as well. So let's go ahead and begin. So, looking at these three perspectives, cyclical, linear, and spiral thinking, I forgot my clicker, so I don't have. I can't really stand and click. I forgot it at school. Um, so the first is cyclical. So society goes through different stages that repeat itself over time. Linear is the average life empirically based on evidence gets better over time. And as historians, we use technological advancements, economic advancements, as well as political progress as evidence for why some historians argue that we are moving in a progressive direction. We are progressing through time. And then lastly is the spiral. History is both a cycle and a line. We are repeating some stuff in the past. We go through these cycles that we always go through, but we are moving forward as well. We are progressing in other ways as well. So let's go deep into the cyclical perspective. So let's go ahead and just click all of these. So history appears to be repetitive. Um, this is the original thought process. History to the ancients was a circle where we go through these different stages in our life. When it came to the Greeks, they thought of anacyclosis, which is the theory that suggests political institutions go through a life cycle. Us humans go through a life cycle. We are all born, we grow into childhood, we become adults, we then eventually die, and every human goes through this cycle. And as we are alive, we look out into the world, especially if you're thinking about our primitive ancestors. We look towards the seasons and what we see in front of us. Every single year, we go through four distinct seasons of winter and spring and summer and fall and winter, and repeating over and over every single year. Every single day, the sun rises, it is midday, the sun sets, it is dark as night, and then it rises and sets and rises and sets over and over and over again. So it is natural for humans to think that we live in a cyclical life. Everything is constantly repeating itself. As a historian, we use evidence as the rise and fall of civilizations. Civilizations throughout all of history do not last forever. Whether you're looking at the Romans or the Greeks, whether you're looking at different dynasties in China, whether you're looking at the different golden ages of different areas throughout the world, every single civilization or empire goes through a life cycle where they rise, become very successful, prosperity is given to everybody, and then you feel the decline, everything doesn't seem like it's getting better, it's getting worse, and then all of a sudden it collapses and falls apart. And a lot of people today, I've been posting TikToks and shorts talking about this conversation. And today, it definitely feels like we are going through that same cycle. The American empire feels like we are declining, and we can see the edge in front of us, and eventually it will just collapse. And a lot of people have been arguing that, yeah, we are in a cyclical world. Like everything will go through its own life cycle. In China, they had the Mandate of Heaven, starting with the Zhao dynasty in the BCE era, where the emperors got legitimate power because the heavens said so. And eventually, when the heavens change or nature itself changes, they will eventually boot or kick out that emperor and install a new emperor. And it's a life cycle that these emperors go through in Chinese history. And even if you look at broader at Chinese dynasties, they all go through these same cycles. There have been multiple warring states periods, even in Japan as well. There are these cycles of warring states and then peace and prosperity, and it comes up every now and then. And I want to actually highlight Anacyclosis because um, I honestly think that this is one of the most interesting things when studying Greek history. This actually came from a Roman living in Greece. This was during the Roman era when Rome conquered over the Greek city states. Coming from their Roman historian Polybius, he proposed anacyclosis, which is the cycle that government institutions go through, using evidence of the ancient Greeks as well as evidence from the Romans themselves as well. And the way that it is proposed is that every civilization starts with a monarchy ruled by one person. And eventually, that one person dies off and gives power to his corrupt son. And then, when that corrupt son dies, you get an even more corrupt grandson that is a tyrannical monarch, absolute ruler who is abusing his power and destroying the lives of the people within that nation, country, city, state, whatever you're studying. And eventually, there will be a revolution of the nobles where the tyranny falls apart and the nobility replaces the monarchy with aristocracy, where the nobles themselves rule over the country, city, state, whatever you're studying. And then eventually, as time keeps moving forward, these people die off and replace them with their sons and grandchildren and whatnot. Goes into oligarchy, where the powerful rich are ruling over the many. A lot of people in the United States in the recent history in the last 10, 15 years have been arguing that we are in an oligarchy. Bernie Sanders, senator from Vermont, went on his oligarchy tour and explained that we are living in an oligarchic nation. When you're looking at President Trump's inauguration, you saw all of the wealthiest billionaires in that room with him there. It is pretty clear that we are living in an oligarchy and I can get into this, but I'm not gonna. But with the whole lobbying efforts and whatnot, Okay, and then eventually the oligarchy will be corrupt, and you'll see a revolution of the people, and they will replace the oligarchy with a democracy, and then eventually the democracy pushes towards populism, and a demagogue appears, and then the demagogue appeals to fears and emotions of people. There will be a panic, then it will be, help me out with this one, ochlocracy, where there is rule by mob, absolute chaos, and then it goes back to the monarchy, and it's this cycle over and over. Their civilizations are constantly repeating this. Then let's go into the linear perspective. This is what a lot of history teachers are have been pushing throughout all of American education, where we are progressing over time. And think about the average history teacher that gives their students a timeline and helps put down these dates on the timeline. It's very, very helpful for students understanding the causes and effects and thinking sequentially throughout history. Um, a lot of historians do point to these different movements in world history, with the scientific revolution, then the pushes towards the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment causes the Atlantic revolutions of the American and the French Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, and the Latin American revolutions, and eventually we move into the Industrial Revolution. I was going to add World War One, World War Two, the Cold War, and whatnot, but then I felt like it got too much, and I forgot an arrow there. We have Hegel coming out in the 18th century during the Enlightenment, and Hegel proposed that we are progressing through time. History is the unfolding of the human spirit, which is the German word for Geist. In history, in some of my classes, I do propose to them the Zeitgeist, which I tell them it's really the vibes. Zeitgeist means the spirit of the times. I say it's the vibes. What is the vibes of the overall um, culture or geographic region at that time that we're studying? And Hegel pushes forth that this idea that we are progressing through time. We are becoming better and better and better over time. Immanuel Kant also coming out during this time and saying that we are moving towards an absolute greater truth in the future. We are pushing towards the, I think he called it the, everyone is gaining more political rights in a society, and that's what we are pushing towards, everybody getting more and more rights, and that is a sign of progress. Karl Marx, who studied Hegel and came forth with, everybody knows Karl Marx, with communism, and with his communist ideals, he pushed forth the idea that actually history is the process of lower classes pushing for rights, pushing for economic rights, and eventually becoming a communist or socialist country. And after the Cold War, you have the American thinker Fukuyama, who proposed that the Cold War proved that we have reached the end of time, that liberal consumerist democracy won against communism, and that free market capitalism is the true and final form of history. And a lot of academics do push for linear thinking, that we are progressing through a time. And I'm going to show you in the next slide the conversation between the two scholars. But real quick, I just want to show you this is a world history timeline. And what I think is most important when looking at this timeline is that they break it off by geographic region. We have Australia and Asia at the top. We have North Africa and the Eastern Mediterranean or the Middle East in the blue. You have Europe in the red, Africa in the orange, and the Americas in the purple. And you can see over time, you see these big blobs of empires conquering over large pieces of land, lasting for a little bit of time and then dying off. And you're seeing how history progresses to become more and more interconnected that we see now in the after the age of exploration. So, two conversations that I want to, or a conversation between two scholars that I want to bring up is between Steven Pinker and his book Enlightenment Now, and two academics. We have Strauss House, their book called William Strauss and Neil Howe. Their book is called Generations: The History of America's Future, and they looked at 1584 to 2069 as evidence. So, starting with Steven Pinker. Steven Pinker is part of the linear thinking. He came out with his book in 2018, while Strauss and Howe came out with their book in 1991. Um, Honestly, I should have been switched these two because first off, this is older, and secondly, this is the traditional thinking of cycles is the traditional thinking. So anyway, starting with Pinker. Pinker believes that empirically our life has gotten better over time. And he cites that we see a decrease in poverty, we see a decrease in famine worldwide, as well as we see a decrease in violence. Now, this book is 7 years old, and it's 2025 when I'm recording this. It's 7 years old, and by this time in 2025, at least here in the States, if you do look elsewhere around the world, you do see an increase of political violence worldwide. We saw a bunch of lower level political officials in Mexico be assassinated recently. We see political assassinations here in the United States. Um, it's a little bit outdated, especially when it comes to decrease in poverty. We actually have seeing increase in poverty here in the United States. And then he also cites that we see an increase in life expectancy. We see an increase in literacy rates around the world. We see an increase in civil rights across the world. People of all different backgrounds have more political rights than they have ever had in human history. And he does have some credit. This is overwhelmingly headed towards the right direction. 2025, if we are comparing 2025 to 16 or 1525, worlds difference across the entire globe. We are significantly more in a better state than we have ever been in human history, especially when it comes to life expectancy. Life expectancy here in the United States is on the decline, but it is some of the highest that has ever been in world history. If you go across the world, we can see life expectancy as high as, I think, 88 for women in Japan. That is extremely high compared to what it would have been in 1584. Moving on to Generations, this book coming out earlier in 1991 proposes the idea that we go through generational cycles of about 80 years. And they come up with this 80-year mark for a couple of reasons. One, it is the average lifespan of a human. I told you that actually, I didn't tell you the US average lifespan. It's around 77 years old, and that is average. In some metros, it's as high as 82. In some rural areas, predominantly in the southern states, it is as low as, I think, 72. So about 10 years difference. It's kind of dramatic. Anyway, so average life cycle is about 80 years. The average person does live close to 80 years. But also, their reasoning is that there's these big world events that are life changing, and comes up with each generation is attributed to a name based on when they were born, according to how they had to respond to that big traumatic event. So the big traumatic events are World War II and the interwar period with the Great Depression, that block of time from around 1914 with World War I going all the way to 1945. They use World War II just itself as the big traumatic event from 1945 as its endpoint. They also use the Civil War, which is about 80 years before World War II. And then 80 years before the Civil War was the creation of the United States with the Revolutionary War and the signing of the Constitution in 1789. So that is about 80 years. And then even going back more, we can see the English Civil War in the 1600s and so on, and how these people experience that traumatic event creates different life cycles of these people. And they all have this certain name that they give them. These authors give each generation a certain name when they are responding to this traumatic event. And then after that traumatic event, we see a high. So they mark post World War II, where the baby boomers are born. They are born in a period of high peace and prosperity from post World War II, 1945 to around 1963, when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Then we have the awakening of the 1960s, where the baby boomers are experiencing a time of peace and prosperity, and they're learning more about the world, and they're coming up with new ideas and arguing and challenging the modern culture. And then there's the unraveling phase. They attribute the 1990s and 2000s as the unraveling phase. And we see a crisis appear after the crisis, or we see the crisis appear after the unraveling phase. And they argue that there is a crisis that will happen in the 2020s, which is 80 years after World War II. And it is a very, very attractive book. And they do have strong evidence to support their perspective. But a lot of people take these two perspectives of we are moving and progressing towards a greater truth or a better world. It is a line that we're moving along, or we are repeating these same cycles of traumatic events. And they take these two and they combine it and create history is actually a spiral. History is both a line where we're moving in a direction, but it's also repeating some of these same events from the past. We see crises happen all the time. We see highs all the time. We see the rise and fall of civilizations throughout human history, but in general, we are moving in a better direction. I have this quote here: progressing in power and technology and science. Hate how it cut it off. But we are repeating the same human behavior that is creating these terrible, terrible moments. But in actuality, I want to talk mostly about the fourth and final model of how we as humans should view our species' history, which is history is an ocean. This is proposed by a YouTuber or a professor posting videos on YouTube that actually inspires me to make these videos as well. His name is Professor Zhang. He is a teacher in Beijing, China, that is teaching his students world history and proposing theories and ideas of how we should view history. And I want to highlight this as a model for how all historians should view themselves, as well as the average adult or human in the world should view our species, which is the world is an ocean. And the way he explains it is that think of all of human history as a big ocean that is constantly moving around. And eventually, there will be currents that are moving in a direction and they collide with each other. And these collisions we can see as wars or as competitions between different civilizations or groups of people. But also, there will be a big hurricane that comes out of nowhere, a tsunami that comes out of nowhere, and obliterates everything in its past. And the way that he does explain it is that you have to view the world in different cultural ecosystems, where China is their own cultural ecosystem, India is their own ecosystem. We have Europe as their own ecosystem, the Levant or the Middle East with Egypt and Turkey and Saudi Arabia and Iran, all as this, and North Africa as this all one big ecosystem. Africa is their own ecosystem. And these ecosystems are defined by obviously their geography, their shared history, and their shared cultural demographics. And that these three help explain what each region is. And each culture interacts one with each other in a way of trade or war and conflict, but most importantly, especially when you're looking at the broader world history, going all the way back to far antiquity in the 3000s with the Middle East, Mesopotamia, and Egypt, and whatnot, that these civilizations, these large empires that come up, have to interact with these borderlands people. For China, it was the Mongols. For the Levant, it was the Arabians. For the Europeans, it was the Northern Vikings. And these groups of people interacting with their borderlands culture start friendly with them, they're trading with them, there might be something happening internally in that country, or they come in conflict with the borderlands, or eventually when with that internal conflict they hire mercenaries to help punish these people that they are fighting a civil war with. And these empires come up, think of like a big ocean current moving forward, and they're interacting with the borderlands as another ocean current, and it's all happening separately and independently throughout the world. And he proposes there are three reasons why each empire will eventually fall. The first is elite overproduction, where we have the nobility class, the aristocracy, the wealthy in each civilization, empire, country, city, state, that are having their children are replacing them, and the overproduction of these wealthy children constantly happening, repeating over time. There will be too many of them and not enough jobs for them. And there will be a competition among the elites, which moves on into rat utopia, where you have each smaller group of people, each lower level of the whole pyramid of society is competing with each other, and a civil war might break out with those interacting with the upper classes. And then over financialization, where we have these banks that are lending out these loans, and the banks end up going into failure. We saw this in the Great Depression. We are seeing it now here in the United States in 2025. And I prefer this method when viewing history because it helps explain that, yes, there are these cycles that these empires go through. Yes, one side is on track, but you have to also consider that they might be isolated from another part of the world. That one part of the world will be rising while the other part of the world will be falling. We will also use this as an example to show us that when a civilization rises and eventually collapses, it will devastate everything in its path, like a hurricane in an ocean. It is absolutely traumatic and destroying everything in its path. And when applying this model to how we see the world today, we are seeing a conflict in Russia and Ukraine. We are seeing a conflict with Palestine and Israel. We're seeing a conflict between China and maybe Iran. We're seeing a conflict between the upper and lower classes in the United States, that it is going to drag everyone into this because of how connected our world is today. And I personally like to harken this method back to the um, the Bronze Age collapse in around 1200, 1100 BCE. There was a complete destruction of all of the major civilizations in the Middle East, with the one exception of Egypt, which was absolutely demolished, but they did end up survive. And we use Egypt's evidence of the Bronze Age collapse to show us that this did happen. If you don't know anything about the Bronze Age collapse, I highly recommend that you go on YouTube and you look it up because it is fascinating. But to summarize, if you have no idea, you just want a little snippet. We're in the Middle East. Think Greece, Anatolia, which is now Turkey, the Levant, which is now Syria and Israel, and then we have Egypt. These used to have major civilizations of the Mycenaean Greeks, the Hittites in Anatolia, we have the Kassites in the Middle East, or the Levant, and we have the Egyptians in the south. And eventually, these civilizations were trading with each other, and we led to the Bronze Age, a time of peace and prosperity and high achievements of human civilization that eventually collapsed due to a big conflict between them and the Sea Peoples. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. This has been a pretty decent long video, one of my longest so far. If you really enjoyed this video, please hit like, hit subscribe. It really means a lot. My goal with this channel is to educate children and adults, but most importantly, educate my family. I know my family is my biggest supporters, and they're the ones that are always watching my videos. And I would love, love, love if this reaches more people, but really it's just for my family. Um, anyway, thank you for listening. If you're watching this, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all